everybody. My name is Lauren Harrison. I'm a chapter visitation assistant for the Southeast District. I'm a life member of the Theta Lambda chapter at Auburn University. Today we're going to talk about getting some tips and tricks on how to prevent getting burnout by creating a balance between all the craziness you have going on between school and band and TBS, and maybe you want to have a personal life in there. And then we'll also go over some ways to handle if you're already in the burnout phase. So I'm going to ask for some interaction throughout this, so get ready to be unmuted. And also, if you have any questions throughout, just unmute yourself and stop me. This is supposed to be to help you guys, so if it's just me talking at you for an hour, may not be the best. So here we go. So for me personally, I start feeling really burnout when I get overwhelmed and when I've overworked myself. So one of the key things for avoiding getting overwhelmed is keeping a balance in your life. Now, obviously, that's easier said than done. One step I use is understanding all of my basics and must-do requirements. As sisters in TBS, we have school, we have band, obviously we have TBS, and you have a personal responsibilities to yourself as well. So where can we find these basic responsibilities? Luckily, right now, while y'all are students, a lot of these things are actually spelled out for you. So does anyone know where we might be able to find out some of our basic responsibilities for school? Like, where are some places that you could definitely find that spelled out for you in black and white?
Would it be in the syllabi of different teachers?
Yeah, that's one. Good job. So like she said, syllabus, your code of conduct, maybe you have scholarships that have certain GPA requirements spelled out for you. You may have things laid out with your major, like you have to take classes at a certain time. Really, a lot of those things are going to be pretty black and white for you as a student. What about band? Where are some places that probably your responsibilities as a band member are laid out?
Going to rehearsal.
Mm-hmm.
Performance schedules.
Yeah, performance schedules. So I know a lot of times, like, you might have a band handbook, or obviously a lot of these things might be laid out in your band syllabus since it is a class as well for a lot of people. Also, your band director is probably pretty clear on the expectations of when you're supposed to be at practice and how you need to act at practice. What about TBS? So from a chapter operations perspective, where can you find your basic responsibilities of being an active member? So yeah, constitution, bylaws, any emails from your presidents or EC members. Yep, mission and vision statements. Now, personal is where it gets a little bit harder. Obviously, there's not some handbook out there saying, here's all the things you need to do to be personally fulfilled. That's going to be up to you. So really, I would recommend everyone kind of taking some of this little quarantine time that we have, and as you're getting ready to wrap up this school year, before you turn to the next, maybe take some time to really sit down and think about what are your personal must-dos? Like, what are things that you need in order to have that balance in your life? So now we have our basic responsibilities. These are things that you have to do to be able to meet your requirements of each, to be able to maintain being a student, maintain being a band member, maintain being an active TBS member. So now it's time to decide where you can and can't give more while you're keeping everything in balance. So we all join TBS to give back to the band, but that doesn't mean you have to be a yes man and do everything. This is a team activity, and not one sister has to do everything. And for those of you that know me, I can be a bit of a yes person. So maybe do what Lauren would do, but do the opposite. Parth is laughing because he knows it's true. If you sign up for everything and you don't have the bandwidth to do everything, it's just going to add stress on top of you, and then you're going to end up getting burnout, and that's not what we want. TBS is work, yes, but it's supposed to be an enjoyable part of your life. It's supposed to be an outlet for you to give back to programs that have meant a lot to you. You as an individual really have to understand your personal limits, and those are going to vary semester by semester, year by year, even week by week, depending on everything else that's going on in your life. But you need to understand what you can do above and beyond, and it's going to be different for everybody. So personal limits, again, everyone's are going to be unique. Given that we all have different majors, we all have different band responsibilities, we all have different personal responsibilities, we all have different roles in our chapters. So you have to think through as an individual and set your own boundaries while keeping in mind your must-do requirements. So let's think through some things for how you can help develop, okay, what can I do above and beyond what's minimally required of me? So outside of your basics of academics, band, and personal health, what time do you have to give extras? Are we talking, and this can be on a weekly basis that you think about this, on a monthly basis, on a semesterly basis. Really, it's what works for you. Really just thinking about, okay, if I have all of this other stuff on my plate that has to get done for me to even be able to keep my active status in any of these things, what can I do extra? What do I have time for? What are the basic requirements of your TBS role? Obviously, if you're chapter president, you might have a lot more must-do requirements of you than an active member. So also, if you're just an active member, how can you give extra time that's also going to help your other sisters while keeping everything that you have going on in balance? What do you want to get out of TBS? Are you trying to get out leadership experience? Is it you're trying to get experience on like logistic things, friendships? Whatever you are trying to get out of this organization, if you do things that are continually for that goal, when you give extras, it's going to help you feel more fulfilled. And if you enjoy what you're doing, it's going to ultimately cause less stress and ultimately prevent getting burnout. So again, it's really about keeping in mind why you joined and what the goal is here for both you personally and the goal for the organization. Can you get things out of TBS for other facets of your life? I know I feel way less overwhelmed when I kill two birds with one stone, so to speak. So maybe there's a way that you can go to your service event that maybe you weren't planning on going to because two sisters are in the same class, and afterwards you can plan studying so that you can kind of check 3 boxes. You can serve your band, you can get some sister time, and you can get some study time. So just try and think about ways that you can use TBS to help you in all these other facets. And y'all are free to interject me at any time, again. Okay, so we've got our personal limits, we've got our basic requirements, but that's still going to create a laundry list of all the things you have to do, and that can be a little overwhelming in and of itself. So your next key is going to be prioritization. So I found this chart. Allison, one of the NED counselors, actually brought it to my attention, and I find it really great. It's called the Eisenhower Principle. So it basically breaks down tasks and activities into the type that helps you prioritize and plan your tasks. So the two axes are urgency. So does an activity demand immediate action, or is it associated with someone else's goals? Like, what's the timeline of this? And then importance, the activity with an outcome that leads to achieving a goal, whether personal or professional. So where does this fall? So an activity can fall in 4 of the buckets. Due means something is very urgent and very important, and it needs to be completed right away. Date, important tasks that are not urgent. So can you put a future date on it? Can you set a timeline that's more in the future rather than immediate? Dump/postpone. These are non-important tasks, non-urgent tasks. They may not require any action at this time, so you can kind of put them in that bucket, put them on the back burner, but they're still on your plate. Delegate. Urgent, but not an important task for necessarily you to complete. So is there a way, especially on TBS activities, if you're an officer, can you delegate it to somebody on your committee? Can you ask someone out for help? Is there something that you can delegate? Like, do you really have to be the one doing it? So I'm kind of ask for some, we're going to do some examples. So I'm going to ask someone to potentially think through something maybe you've had to do this semester when you were feeling overwhelmed and something you could have put in one of these buckets.
I was committee head for like our sisterhood committee. And so one of my jobs was to help organize like a Halloween party. And so like it was kind of impossible for me like to like incorporate all aspects of the party, like the music and candy and costumes and stuff. So we were able to break it down. And so we had each member of our committee be in charge of one thing. Like one person was in charge of music, other one was in charge of snacks, another one was in charge of decorations, and it turned out great.
Yeah, that's a great example of delegate, and probably took a lot of stress off of you if you had to run around like a crazy person and do all of that.
Yeah, so this semester there were definitely a couple of problems where I thought that I could, dump them because it was like, oh, like that was something, but it didn't end up being that big of a deal. But it did end up being that big of a deal. And so there have been a couple times this semester where I've had to, if anything, sort of shift my own mindset because I was like, oh, that won't be a problem. And then I'll have a problem.
Yeah.
So it rapidly shifted from dump to do. And so, yeah, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is one of the dangers of dump is maybe on some of those, especially for TBS or school or band related things, ask your sisters or fellow band members or classmates for second opinion, because I do the same thing. And I'm like, it's fine. And then it's not fine. Someone said creating flyers and newsletters. I had to delegate committee members to help print and display them, and it helped relieve some stress. Yes, awesome. That's the biggest one, I think, we as TBS members, especially a lot of people that are in officer positions, you really want to, you have that, especially when you're a freshman officer, you're like, yes, I'm going to do this, I'm going to get everything done, and you kind of forget you do have this whole committee and this whole chapter of people behind you to help you accomplish tasks, and it's okay to delegate, and you don't have to do everything yourself.
I have an example.
This is also, go ahead, Lori.
I have an example where I was delegated to. So when we were organizing our crescendo project, that didn't actually happen because of the world. Our focus on 5 liaison and our VPS wanted to do Girl Scouts, and I am a former Girl Scout, and my mom has connections to all the Girl Scouts everywhere in Kansas. And so when her service unit didn't work out, she was able to give me a contact for our service unit. So I became the delegate for organizing the date and getting troop signups, while the others kind of worked on what the plan for doing the event was.
Awesome. Well, I'm sorry the event couldn't happen. Sounds like it would have been great.
Yeah,
I did
we
a couple
had like 30 girls signed up, and it was supposed to be this weekend, I think, actually.
Well, luckily you've done a lot of the planning and you've developed that relationship. So hopefully, if and when the world goes back to normal, you've already got a head start on things. So
yeah. So I'm betting that we can do it next year. So.
We got some stuff in the chat. So Amanda said, sometimes I put TBS before academics as a way to procrastinate. It's hard to balance when I am really excited to be involved in this organization, but also have higher priorities. Yep, been there. done that, and we're gonna talk about some stuff on the next slide that kind of talks about procrastination. A couple years ago, I was social committee chair. I didn't have a car yet, so I couldn't go to the store to buy my own supplies for socials. I either needed to delegate shopping to other committee members or find time to go with someone. Yeah. Encouraging EC members to delegate to a committee, i.e. BPM delegate management of interest events to membership committee so that they can focus on getting everything done ready for the initiation first degree. Yep. Okay, so you've worked through, some prioritization. The next factor, obviously you can do all the to-do lists and all the prioritization in the world, but time is the biggest constraint. So we're going to talk through some things we do to waste time and sometimes that we should do to save time. So here's a list of different things. So putting off making decisions, that kind of falls into procrastination. So lacking priorities and standards, that kind of falls into what Amanda said of where a lot of times we want to do the fun stuff like TBS and do all of that because it sounds a lot better than studying. So concentrating on one task at a time is a way you could save. So maybe set some boundaries for yourself while saying, okay, I can work on TBS stuff if I get these 2 assignments done. And maybe you could even get a study buddy in your chapter to help hold you accountable for that. So looking through some of these things, I'm going to ask for some volunteers to give an example of a situation where we're going to have a little bit of truth-telling time, where you might have handled a situation with a waster and it caused you a little bit more stress, and what's a way you could have done it differently with a saver. I know for me personally, so a lot of y'all know me, but I was a chapter president and I was also a district president. I would a lot of times fail to prioritize, and like Amanda, doing TBS stuff was always way more fun than doing chemical engineering exams and all that stuff. And then I ended up changing my major anyway. But so I arguably should have started using my checklists and to-dos. I am now a very big to-do list and checklist person. So that's something that has helped me.
I've got a time waster. I always underestimate the amount of time that it takes me to do my homework. So then every Sunday I'm incredibly stressed out because I've saved all my homework for the week.
So what's something you could do on the saver side to maybe help prevent that?
Just this past week, I starting my homework earlier. So I started I had to read 4 chapters in a book, so I started reading on Thursday instead of on Friday or Saturday. And so I'm still stressed, but I'm working on getting used to starting my homework earlier.
Yep. Hey, baby steps. Rome was not built in a day, so it's a good non-TBS example. I like it.
I also find that sometimes, I do the to-do list thing, but it's a lot harder to be productive if I don't break even my to-do list down. And that sounds monotonous, but it's I have this many projects that I need to do. But I think it would help if I took the time to break down even the projects into steps. So that way it's a little bit less overwhelming.
Yes, I completely. To-do lists can be counterproductive if you don't do them in a way that is effective for you. And I see that someone raised their hand. So I think that means you can talk. If you're muted, you can go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say with the time wasters, a lot of times it can be more effective if you I see it says lacking priority standards, policies, and procedures. That probably could waste time when you're going through paperwork, trying to get stuff done, planning an event or just doing stuff in general. like you guys laid out for us on the website. Usually like everything we need is like in our hands, but sometimes we just, try to get things done so quickly that we end up like getting backtracked and having to, start over because we weren't using the tools provided.
Yep. It's a great thing with TBS. Yeah. That's a big thing. If y'all are ever getting stressed out with some of the procedural stuff like OMRS and everything like that, that's something that your district officers, your chapter CDAs, and your counselors can obviously help you with. There's a ton of resources out there on the national website. There's so many things, especially like if you're overwhelmed because you're planning one of your overture events or one of your crescendo events. There's so much documentation out there on the website to help you plan those activities and help go through that. And there's also guides for MRS. Also, luckily, most of the counselors and most of the CVAs like have experience with that. So if you're ever getting stuck on something like that, that's what we're here for. So use us as a resource, and hopefully we can alleviate some of the stress, because one of the biggest stress points I know for me when I was chapter president was just lack of knowledge on how I'm supposed to fill this out. What does this question mean? Oh my gosh, like I don't want to fill it out wrong. So always reach out to us. We're here to help. You can reach out to pretty much any CVA. You have one assigned to you. You should know who that person is. They hopefully have reached out to your chapter. But if not, you can reach out to your counselors and they can tell you who's assigned to you.
I also, hi, Alyssa, I'm back.
No, it's fine.
I also find that it helps me when I give myself certain times to do things, like in the day, like, oh, at 4:15, I'm going to do this and this thing. Because if I just say, oh yeah, I'm going to do this today, then I'm more likely to put it off. And times really help me stick to things better.
Yeah. That's a big thing with your to-do checklist, like add times to it. And Tristan said that in the group chat as well. It's kind of a combining checklists and timeline. And I do like the idea that you had of breaking out your to-do list, because if you aren't, it goes back to setting kind of like SMART goals for yourself. You need your to-do list to be actionable items. It can't just be, I have a project due. It's like, okay, well, that's great and wonderful. Like you said, what are the things you need to do to complete that project? It's going to make you feel much more action-oriented than just overwhelmed.
I also find that I have a really difficult time making decisions about whether I want to do something, so that do I say yes, and putting off those decisions only inevitably makes it worse, because then whatever actions I needed to take to do that thing is much more rushed.
Yeah, that is for sure. Are there any things that people want to get advice from the group on how to handle, like you're in this position, you're trying to figure out how to tackle it from a prioritization standpoint or anything? I know also the world's a bit crazy and more stressful right now, considering the way you normally would complete tasks is also potentially thrown out the window a little bit. What if you have a bunch of cool ideas but no time to fulfill them? That. So I would kind of recommend, one, when you're thinking about your prioritization, so I would make your list of ideas, and I would honestly then kind of make an action plan for each idea. Okay, so what's all the things that you would have to do to complete each of those tasks? So you don't have the time to do all of them. So let's sit down and look at each of them objectively and figure out, okay, what would we need to do to get this one done? And then how that can include, okay, is it just something I'm going to do? Is it something that I need chapters buy-in on? What are all these things? And then from there, I would then look at, especially if they're for chapter stuff, how can they fit into the overall goals of the chapter? How can they fit into our vision and mission statement? How do they play into the purposes of our organization? And that can also help you with prioritization, especially on a chapter level. How are these tasks that you're doing fulfilling the purposes of TBS? And if there's, let's say you have 4 cool ideas and one of them fits 3 of the 5 purposes, and then maybe the other ones only fit 1 or 2. Maybe doing that one first is the best idea. Also, you can use this chart to potentially help you do that. Planning is something that really helps me, is just like sitting down and taking a minute to think about. You just have to do it with a calm breath, because if you if you go into it a bit hectic, it can just become even more overwhelming. But really sitting down, and that's something that obviously I think is helpful in guiding chapter meetings, as well as focusing on one thing at a time and figuring out how does it relate back to the bigger picture. Okay. Let's see. So Lauren, I'm already there. I am already stressed out to the max. I'm running on empty. I am not motivated anymore. I am cool doing the bare minimum. I don't really want to push myself anymore. I'm crashing like crazy, and that's just making it way worse. I don't know what to do. Well, that sounds like you're overwhelmed and burnout, and that's okay. We all get like that from time to time, but what can we do to fight it and move on, and how can we motivate and help our sisters if we notice someone's feeling that way? So let's cure the burnout. This picture was a stock picture, but I felt it worked. So the first step to recovery, as they say, is acceptance. So acknowledge that what you're feeling is normal, and let's put our big girl, big boy pants on, and we're going to figure it out. So let's talk through some of the R's of recovery. So refresh, recharge, relax, and redo. The first 3 are going to be unique to you. So what are some things that y'all do to refresh, recharge, or relax? / what are some things that you could do with your sisters to help everybody? This might help your personal fulfillment and personal goals as well. Chats, I see them. Yes, go on a walk. Oh my gosh, I have to do that during the middle of the workday sometimes. Thankfully, I can still walk outside. Coloring night, yes. I actually have my coloring stress book right here. Here you go. Yeah, game nights. I'm a big game night person. Hanging out in an environment where it's not business related. Yes, that is the biggest thing that I try and like tell chapters. So obviously, if you're hanging out with sisters, you almost always end up talking about TBS, and then you talk about all the things that need to get done, and then you just get more stressed. So if you're hanging out with sisters, I know it's really hard, but maybe not talk about business when you're just trying to hang out. I know it's really hard. Maybe you can even do it like a jar, where if you say something, you like that person has to like buy the next round of chips and salsa or something. Try and keep it non-business related if the whole goal is to relax. Movie nights, paint nights, grab Starbucks, lunch together on campus. Yes, you have to eat. That should be one of your personal prioritizations, is to give substance to your body. So kill 2 birds, 1 stone. Little date nights, yes, yes. Dinner after chapter is a good idea. Kind of a good after everything. Yes, play, just dance. And it's an exercise bonus. Yes, I like that one. Sister hangout and study time, yes.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Since we're all, home and in quarantine, sometimes, I've actually tried it, learning new hobbies. So it'll be cool to like maybe have a Zoom conference and learn a new hobby together. Kind of like we're doing now with the sharing the screen. You guys could learn how to crochet together or make bracelets or something like as a chapter while you're home, since some people can't really, well, they probably are too scared to leave their home or travel or anything.
It's a good one. Yeah. Especially right now when there's a lot of added stress in the world. Good to get connected and be here for each other. So also now let's kind of talk about the redo. So I think of the redo as a little bit separately, where it's, okay, thinking about what could I do better next time. So using even the techniques that we've talked about in this workshop on what steps could you have taken to potentially avoid it, getting burnout and getting so overwhelmed. And again, obviously that's easier said than done, especially when I know it, when it rains, it pours, it seems like. So of course, all your tests always fall on the same week that there's like 3 service activities scheduled and there's an away band trip. So it's just everything's all at once. So really just trying to take a breath and try and use some of these tips and tricks and trying to redo next time. Okay. So kind of all comes back down to too much TBS versus too little TBS. And I know some people are like, how can you have too much TBS? You can have too much of anything. Moderation is spice. Again, not a single chapter member can carry the entire chapter on their back. And also in turn, the EC's job is not to do everything for everyone all the time. And this is a team project, as Siobhan likes to say. So how can you as a whole chapter help individuals keep the balance? For your EC, it's setting clear expectations, or you as a chapter member, if you're organizing activities, setting clear expectations. It'll help you and it'll help your chapter. If you've got a project going on, part of planning your project, lay out who's responsible for what and what that means. So for actives, for people that don't have a direct assignment, it could literally just mean your job is to show up. That is your job. But then they know that that's their minimum must do, and they've got that. Or it's my job is to, someone had mentioned that they had delegated out for their Halloween party. Someone's job was music, and they said, your job is music, here you go. They delegated out and made a list of who all was responsible for what, and that probably made everyone's lives a lot less stressful. Utilizing committees. Don't know if we've said that enough times in this whole thing, but most of your chapters have committees, or you should. And I guess, I know my chapter, we were never the best at using all of our committees. A lot of times it just turned into committee meetings were just another meeting that you had to go to where you just talked about stuff, and no one really had action items from the meeting other than whoever the chair or the officer was. So trying to actually use the committee. It's also a great way for those committee members to learn about the organization and gain some experience. The last one, don't push your personal limits on other people. So you may have a semester where, you know what, your class load is pretty light, you've got more time to donate. Whereas another sister could be taking 4 of their major courses and they have a ton of projects, and you know what, they can't do much more beyond what's required of them as an active member. So be there for that sister and help them out, and don't necessarily think because you have time, they also have the same amount of time. And that's about going above and beyond their requirements of an active member. Obviously, if you're an EC member and someone's not meeting their basic requirements, that's a different conversation.
I have a question.
Yes.
So how do you effectively, or how would you effectively, push your sisters to give it their all and to try their best, for the chapter without pushing your personal limits on them? We know we all can't, do the same thing, but how do you still encourage your sisters to try their best at all times without making it seem like you're trying to, put your personal limits on them?
Yeah, so that's obviously, it's a delicate balance because you obviously don't want to be like cracking the whip and putting your personal limits on everyone. Something that I think helps is having prioritization and planning of activities be more of a chapter activity. Obviously, part of your job as an EC member a lot of times is to do the groundwork for that. So maybe it is, okay, the EC came up with these 5 ideas to accomplish this goal of ours, and here's what each of them would entail. So maybe have the actual selection process of that be for the chapter. That way they're getting some buy-in, they're getting excited, and even part of that conversation, go ahead and delegate things out. Because I think the biggest thing is, again, why did each person join TBS? Obviously for a lot of the same reasons, but what are they wanting to get out of the organization? And if it's accomplishing their personal goals, they're going to be much more likely to be involved. So in having them be part of the decision process allows them to also get their personal goals in there as well, versus here's a laundry list of to-dos that we need to complete as a chapter and we have to because we have to. Feels much more decision oriented rather than like directives. Also, think a big thing is showing by action. So obviously and I know we all have our days where we are not in the best of moods, but just trying to be that positive force. If you're at a service event and you notice some people are just having a bad day, like be that positive force and be the one having a good attitude, because it'll be contagious. Let's see. How would you go about delegating a task to someone who's known for not following through? That is a great question. Let's see. Destiny, I'll get to yours in just a second. So for delegating a task to someone who's known for not following through, because obviously you want to give everyone a chance. So for that, I would be clear in communication. So one of the things I would do is, first of all, like if you're delegating something in a committee meeting, I would record it in minutes that you're delegating that to this person, and being very clear on what they have to complete, and also sending a follow-up. Obviously, part of your committee meetings might be that you send the minutes out afterwards. Again, one thing that's really cool about if you do your committee minutes in like the Google format and you do it in like Google Notes or the Google Word document, you can actually like highlight people and tag them as a task. So then it'll also send a reminder to them that they have these outstanding tasks. It'll highlight in the minutes what is assigned to them. I know that helps me remember what's assigned to me in some of our like TBS National Committee stuff. So that might be a good way for them to get reminders that aren't you just like poking and micromanaging them. But also, I mean, I would say don't be afraid to just follow up and do it consistently across the board. Follow up with everyone that you assign tasks to. Just send out maybe like a reminder like 2 or 3 days before the deliverable is due and say, hey, just checking in to see if you have any questions or need any help, and see how it's going. Keep it light, but also expect a response. That's what I would recommend. Did that help a little bit? Put it in the chat. Perfect. Okay. Destiny, what are some ways to shift the mentality of e-board holds all the power to the power is within the chapter so that sisters are more encouraged to participate? Again, I think part of it is having chapter planning be with the whole chapter. I mean, that's not to say there are things that the DEC is going to have to decide beforehand, and there are decisions that are up to the EC. So I would say have your chapter planning and chapter prioritization be in the 2 parts, where EC kind of narrows down the focus to a handful of things and have the chapter decide from there, and have it be up to a vote, have it be that type of thing. I mean, have it be like if the BPS is planning, has to do a certain number of projects that the band director needs XYZ things done, have them present it like, here's the stuff we need to get done. How do we want to handle this? Like, I've come up with some ideas, have it be more collaborative. Again, I think, and encouraging that conversation in the chapter room will also help that. Let's see. Did that help answer your question, Destiny?
Yes, thank you.
No problem. Know how to handle burnout with ourselves. But if we see burnout with other sisters, how can you go about it without overstepping? So hopefully if you're friends with them, you can kind of just automatically text them and be like, hey, are you feeling okay? Like, I would say try inviting them to something. See if, let's see, if like you feel like they're getting burnt out on TBS and you notice they're not wanting to show up as stuff, offer them a ride, say, hey, do you want to go together? And then maybe we can go to the library and get some food and study together afterwards. Kind of just bring them on board with you. Feel like that's just extending a hand. You don't need to be direct about it and be like, you seem really burnt out and I'm worried about you. Now, some people that might be what it takes, but doing it that way. You could even do a little bit reverse psychology, talk to them and be like, hey, I just need to talk because I'm feeling really stressed and I want to talk to someone about it. And you seem like someone that could help me through it. You probably also are stressed out, but a good vent session is never a bad thing. Just keep it in control. Yeah, it's always tough, but I would recommend just kind of offering that helping hand. How do you motivate sisters to attend and participate in different events if it's not a requirement? So I think a big thing, again, also that not only helps with prioritization, but can also help people want to participate is when you're doing events, whether it be a sisterhood event or anything like that, assign it to a purpose. Like, why are we doing this event? Help sisters understand and help the chapter understand as a whole why you're doing this activity. I know I'm a lot more willing to do something if I understand the overall purpose behind it. So obviously you want people to go to sisterhood activities because they're more fun when sisters show up, and it's a larger group of sisters and it's not just the same 5 that show up to every sisterhood event. Talk about how that fits into the purposes and what you're trying to get out of it. And again, I would also say maybe, especially if it's a sisterhood event, maybe have it vote, like have the sisterhood chair or whoever's planning the event send out a poll of, hey, what are we going to do on this day? Do we want to go out to eat? Do we want to play games? What games do we want to play if we're going to play games? And maybe encourage them to offer a suggestion to participate. Because obviously people don't necessarily want to participate in something that they don't like to do. So try and keep a variety. That way everyone can get a little something out of it. Were there any other specific types of events, Brian, that you were asking about?
Yeah, a lot of it is sisterhood. Like, we will have about the same 5 people show up, and even it's like pulling teeth, trying to get people to come to anything besides like the bare minimum.
Did you go to Motivating the Middle today?
No, I wasn't able to.
Okay, well, it's going to be posted on the YouTube channel in the next couple weeks. I would suggest watching that as well, but kind of a little high level. I mean, again, I think part of it is figuring out what people want to do. Not saying you aren't offering a variety of sisterhood activities, but again, also, I mean, something that a lot of chapters will do too, and I mean, you obviously don't want to have to bribe people, but sometimes they'll be like, okay, the sister that does the most, like, that comes to the most non-service related activities, like, gets a certificate at the end of the semester. I don't know. Like, maybe make it a little competitive. That's an idea that you could do. But I know that something that a couple of chapters I've seen do now is they do like buddies throughout the semester. So to try and like get sisters to interact more. So like you're assigned a pair every month, and you should try and at least get lunch or coffee or a study date with that sister one-on-one just to get to know them. And that helps kind of like build friendships across. Amanda says they do that and call it Turtle Talks. Has that helped y'all, Amanda? Like, have you noticed that kind of helps more people feel more connected to the chapter and maybe want to show up to more events? She said absolutely. So maybe that's a good one to try. Also a good way, I know that a lot of chapters include MCs in that, so good way for MCs to start to get to know sisters. I know when you're a new MC, it's kind of scary to walk up to some of the sisters that you don't know as well. Does anybody else have any questions or ideas on ways before we close?
I have a question.
Yes.
So in chapter, like we try to do the thing where we have our chapter more involved and we have them have their input for different service events we do throughout the semester. So in chapter, everyone would agree. It's like, yeah, that sounds totally cool. We'll totally do it. But when the time comes, like 2 or 3 people actually show up.
So obviously that's harder. So again, I think it's about, that one's harder, just because obviously they were part of the decision. I think that's when it is, as an EC, you do have to say, you probably are better off to do sign-up lists and say, like, we need X number of people to sign up, especially if that's what you need to complete the project. Unfortunately, because of things like that, that's why a lot of chapters have service points, and you have to get a certain number of points as an active member to be able to stay active, because at some point the chapter still has to do its job and get everything done. So I would say look at some procedural things to see if you can help with that, because also if there's a sign-up list, that might help people, quote unquote, keep it on their radar outside of just that we talked about it in a chapter meeting. While they're planning out their week or something, it's already there. There's kind of a little bit of a, I really should show up if I put my name on a list. Let's see, making team building events for sisterhood mandatory, good or bad thing. So obviously mandatory events, like, we all hope that we don't have to have them, but mandatory events are not necessarily a bad thing depending on how you set it. If you're trying to do team building events, I would recommend tying them to a time the chapter members have already delegated out. So maybe donate a chapter to, we're going to do some team building exercises, have a brief business meeting at the beginning where it's basically just go down officer updates, take 5 minutes to do that, and then dive into that is what I would recommend. Because really where people get frustrated, I notice, about having to attend things like that is when it is taking away even more time from their school, their studying, their band. Obviously, we're all very busy. So I would try the first time you do one of those, because you want people to show up and you want people to be engaged. Do it during a time they have theoretically already allotted to TBS, and that might help. Yep. Let's see, Parth, that is too long. I'm not reading it. You can read it out loud. Parth.
Say it out loud.
I don't want to read that out loud. Read it.
Okay. So basically, it was addressing Morgan's question earlier about like getting people to come to events. So like my chapter was having those similar issues, and so we kind of thought, if we have events that like those sisters, when they went through the recruitment event, so say like during the time that they were trying to join TBS, they came to like a bad movie night, or they came to a Zumba class. Try recreating those events, because that brought them in, so that can reignite their fire to come to events. So if you're doing monotonous things that you do or kind of like repeatedly as an active chapter, maybe change it up, because that spice can add in, you know, the fires that'll get them excited to do things again.
Yep. Yeah.